Thank you very much for joining us for our very first Reconciliation Victoria Maggolee webinar. Nicole Finlay, the CEO for Reconciliation Victoria, joining you. Thank you very much to all of the Victorian local governments who have come out today and stepped up out of your busy schedules to join us. We're really excited to be joined by some wonderful speakers today, and really we've got a great conversation ahead of us. I know that many of you will be coming in from various countries, so we might just take a pause for just a moment while we have a few more people coming in, and then we'll start very shortly in our conversation. But thank you again for joining us. And I know we've got quite a few people now shuffling in, and what a gorgeous day it is here. If you are joining us, we're streaming in from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, and I'd like to open today's webinar with an acknowledgement. So Reconciliation Victoria acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Victoria and recognises First Peoples' continuing connection to lands, waters, and community. We pay our respects to elders, past and present, who carry the memories, traditions, cultures, and aspirations of First Peoples, and who forge the path ahead for emerging leaders. We dedicate ourselves to working respectfully with and guided by First Peoples, and to listen and amplify the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in all the work that we do. I'd also like to just take a moment just to reflect on the federal apology, the anniversary, the 15-year anniversary that took place on Monday. Many of your workplaces will have taken a moment to reflect and recognise this significant and important date that we must never forget. And I would just like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung elders that we continue to connect with on our workplace, and just acknowledging your communities that you work amongst, and also First Peoples who are joining us for today's webinar. So we have a really important conversation ahead of us today, and just such a timely conversation. Many of you will have been watching the media closely. You will have had Jan 26 pass in your calendars, and now the federal anniversary of the apology. Where we are heading in the next few weeks is towards a week of action, towards the voice to Parliament and the referendum conversations. So there are many national campaign groups and many groups around us who are preparing for this week of action. So today we have the very good fortune of speaking to three of the Victorian local governments who have formally passed actions and motions to support the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So they've gone beyond signing a petition to formally put actions in place to show their support. So we'll be speaking to Zali Mifsud, who is the First Nations lead advisor from Banyule City Council. We'll be speaking to Leanne Pearson, Reconciliation Project Officer from Bayside City Council, and Julie Saylor-Briggs, who's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Senior Policy Officer from City of Greater Geelong, and one of the first executive appointments in Victorian local government. So very privileged to be talking to all of these great speakers today, and also to Emily Holm, the National Field Organisation from the Heart National Campaign Group. And I've had the fortune of meeting Emily earlier this year to get a little bit of a sneak peek into what great work is ahead of us this year and being done from the Heart campaign group. So we'll learn a lot more and hear a lot more from Emily today. So we might jump into conversation so that I can stop my talking and hear from our great speakers. So I might head across in conversation and welcome them into our space today. Julie, we can see you in there. Give us a wave for people who can see you. Excellent. I'm going to deep dive straight in and start with a conversation with you, Zali, if we can. On 5th of December, late last year, Banyule City Council formally passed motions and actions to support the Uluru Statement from the heart. I'm wondering if you can share why Banyule City Council chose to formally show its support and also what actions your council is committed to.
Beautiful. Thanks, Nick. Well, Nagata, hello, everyone. Great question and really timely. I feel like it was only yesterday we actually adopted the statement in full, but for us, it was really around this being the next step in our journey of understanding our role as a local government within reconciliation. We've really investigated over the last kind of 6 months what we believe our role is in reconciliation. And through that, we had really identified that we had a position to begin to advance self-determination for our First Nations peoples as a local government agency. We have some really great groups within Banyule, including our RAP advisory group, our traditional owners, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Corp, as well as some really great ally groups in terms of reconciliation Banyule. And what we had heard through our ongoing discussions around different topics was that the move towards self-determination was really the next step in this kind of context. And the statement and our council's unanimous adoption of the statement for Banyule was really our formal commitment to ensure that we play a role in supporting the move towards self-determination for our Indigenous peoples and my peoples. We have been supporting work within treaty and truth-telling here in Vic with the First Peoples and the Yurok Truth-Telling Commission, and more locally doing that within Banyule, within our residents and within our space as well. So adopting the statement in full was just really adding that third element of amplifying the voice, which for us really aligned with, as I said, what we as a council were putting at the forefront of our reconciliation agenda, which is really empowering self-determination.
Yeah. Thanks, Zali. And I mean, just a big shout out to, we've got a lot of people that are tuning in and letting us know what country they're tuning in from. So thank you very much for people saying hello today. And Zali, just coming off the back of that question, I just want to share with people, they've probably been looking in at our Maggolee website over the years. And I know that as a strong RAP coordinator yourself, you've obviously worked across City of Kingston's RAP in the past and now Banyule's, and you've got carriage of those RAPs, and many people sort of lean into Maggolee and check out our website just for various resources. But I want to talk about, in terms of the being First Nations lead and having carriage of the RAP, how you've been able to then kind of work that in as a process to bring councillors and community around this conversation about the Uluru Statement to really, make sure that it is beyond kind of signing a petition level, that you're really bringing your councillors on board. Can you talk a little bit about what you do in your role to kind of influence that?
Yeah, absolutely. The role at the moment, and for councils that have one identified role in this space, and there's obviously some councils that have a whole team that do this piece of work, but through my kind of, I guess, experience being an Aboriginal woman working in local government, being in a self-identified role, I think there is that two-part of ensuring that our community are aware and informed and have the opportunity to engage. But internally, just as important is that understanding as a council and that education, which I think all of us have the privilege to learn now. There is so many resources out there for every individual to engage with, but part of my role has a really strong focus on ensuring that the organisation I support on their journey of understanding, and as I said, understanding their role within this space, because it hasn't really been a great guidance that, no one really knows what the recipe for reconciliation is. So bringing everyone internally along that journey, including councillors, and acknowledging that they've had their own experiences within that space, as well as, I think is more important than the outcome, is really ensuring that people feel safe to be brought along that journey, and ensure that as a council we come to a collective, we have a great understanding now as our position. How do we now action that moving forward?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Zali. And look, you've touched on some really good points, and we're going to fishtail back shortly, and we'll continue our conversation a bit more about Banyule's work, because a key thing that Banyule is doing, and one of the key tasks is about informing constituents, and we're going to touch more on that. And Banyule has been particularly active in its newsletter of late with your mayor, Councillor Castaldo, putting the the council's commitments right out in front in the newsletter, and we really applaud Banyule for doing that. It is great work and really good to see. So I'm going to come across to Julie now, if I can. Julie, you're sort of in the distance there, but we can see you, and hopefully we can hear you too. So Julie Saylor, as Julie Saylor-Briggs is joining us in from City of Greater Geelong, and Julie, really, in terms of, I guess, the work that council's been doing, and as you being their executive lead in the big seat there, City of Greater Geelong was one of the first councils to formally embrace and show its support for the Uluru Statement. Can you share with us how and why Greater Geelong stepped up to show its support beyond simply signing the petition? Oh, we can't hear you, Julie. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now, everybody?
Yes, yes.
Oh, gosh, what a nightmare of IT. Anyway, before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge our elders, past, present and future, or emerging, and that I come to you from the glorious country of the Wadawurrung Nation.
Yeah, thank you.
So at the City of Geelong, in our living memory, we have not, you wouldn't say we would have the best, I don't know, school board if it was school, or if there was a rating, or if there was a way of doing business, we would always be just sitting below average. This is something that we've acknowledged once I commenced in 2021. At that stage, we had already commenced with actions through the Reconciliation Action Plan developments, but they had only formally endorsed. So the reason why we endorsed that is because we needed to have a legitimate position in community that was based on trust and respect. Through the Uluru Statement from the Heart, it was felt that this was a great way in which to build the relationship with the whole of community, but more importantly, actually focus on some of the key aspects of the heart and to build that into the way the city works. So like Zali's place, like that council, it is all about how do we platform self-determination for First Nation people? What does that look like internally and externally? By endorsing and becoming an active signatory, it is not just a visible demonstration and very easy for a council. They sign off on a lot of things. You know, they just sign off. That's what they do. It's part of their business. However, with the Uluru Statement from the Heart, it was probably one of our very first legitimate deep dive, actions to take to support the First Nation community here. Even that the same year we were working towards treaty. Treaty was in community. Yuruk was starting to come out. And so this was a really great start because of that checkered living relationship that we have. Since we've embraced that through the RAP, we've moved really quite progressively forward, and it was actually the foundation for our 26th of January conversations, which was almost a year-long journey with our communities. So I think that the Uluru Statement from the Heart is actually at the heart of who we are, and that is one thing that the City councillors all agreed upon in one council meeting. So, that was great. We're not as advanced as Banyule, and probably not also as Bayside in a lot of areas, but a lot of our work for everyone here for the heart is on the ground. That's where the heart is, that's where the heart lives. Our endorsed signature is just to show our community that we are here with them, working with our First Nation communities and placing their self-determination sovereignty first in all that we do.
And, Julie, you've touched on some great points there, and I want to actually quickly, get into that conversation about self-determination. We know that all Victorian Aboriginal, the Victorian local governments have the Victorian Aboriginal and Local Government Strategy, which was launched early last year. And we know that this will mean 5 years self-determination local action plans between local governments and First Peoples and traditional owners. Really, I guess what we know with the Voice to Parliament, it is that invitation for voice and truth and treaties and all of those things that will sit with within that VELGS framework, if you like, that state strategy. And we are a unique state in Victoria to have that that VELGS strategy. Do you see this as a pretty natural process, and that they are intrinsically linked, that the two just fit together in a sense?
Yeah, I think that they marry really well. And that if you combine this great work at the strategic level, as well as what's coming down from federal government, and then what we already have through our local government council plans and so on and so forth, I think it's actually all aligned. Even the Local Government Act talks to this now. So it is, I'm not sure if we'll be presented with such good timing to be able to embrace this. I can't speak for the other 79 councils, but all the other First Nation advisors or teams in councils, here is self-determination by virtue of the way in which we work. There's only myself and another First Nation officer in a senior role. Everything in the city here comes past Brett Farmer and myself. And so we are key figures in recruitment, professional development, comms/media, strategic development, policy development. Very focused areas are obviously employment, procurement. And so we're looking for the deep dive, the deeper reforms, transformations in the city, or everything from our EB, flexible leave given around public holidays, to providing time for non-Aboriginal staff members or work colleagues to participate in conversations, engagement points, volunteer at First Nation events, and actually get actively involved. We also demonstrate that through ensuring that all staff across the city have access to becoming an ally, and all information, everything that's trending in our communities, we will present internally. And obviously from the councillor support team down. So it's a single aligned message. Every time we take a step forward, we take a collective step forward. So you won't hear the steps, Nicole, in the jungle, because it's a quiet step of movement. And we'll still be moving in 5 years, hopefully. I think for all of us, it's to keep moving, to keep the journey alive and the passion in the front of everything we do. And that's a big job.
Oh, but, it really talks about self-determination in action, Julie, and it really also talks to that very saying, nothing about us without us. This is very much about, that joint decision-making, getting into the actual practice of shared decision-making and the absolute benefits and, positive cultural change and systemic change that happens when we are able to have voice and community leadership at the table, like yourself, and obviously the work that you're doing with Uncle Brett Farmer. So thank you for mentioning him, Julie. I'm going to come across to Leanne now from Bayside City Council. I know we're going around the houses with the council, and then we're going to get to some of the real practicalities about what the From the Heart campaign are doing as well. Leanne, if we can jump in here, obviously in terms of location for Bayside City Council, it's a Melbourne Metro Council in the southeast, and it's probably fair to say your Aboriginal community population is probably fairly small along the demographic along the Bayside there, but there's certainly been a long-standing commitment from Bayside to in the reconciliation space, particularly in the investment of really strong reconciliation workers and coordinators like yourself and Deborah Mellett before, who had the role before you. So I'd really like to sort of talk a bit about Bayside's continued commitment that it's made. And I guess you have also been a reconciliation ally and champion for the past 20 years, both with Greater Dandenong and now with Bayside City Council. Can you talk about what the Uluru Statement from the Heart means, one, in your role, but also to council? What does it kind of feel like for you at the moment?
Thanks, Nicole. If I could start also with an acknowledgement to traditional owners of the land on which I am, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today on this Zoom, meeting, elders and emerging leaders in community. And special mention to my two colleagues, strong Aboriginal woman Zali and Julie, Torres Strait Islander woman, just to, privileged to sit on these with you as well in this space. I'm a Papua New Guinean Australian woman, so I have worked, as you said, alongside community for too long now, makes me sound old, but 20 odd years. So, and very passionate about it. So I guess, yes, as you said, Nicole, Bayside, I worked in Dandenong, I've worked in the northern suburbs of Melbourne and also around the country, Northern Territory, etc. Very different. I grew up here, very close to here in Cheltenham, so very different demographic, but a really strong commitment to reconciliation. My predecessor, Deborah Mallet, who's a strong Aboriginal woman, has developed our second Reconciliation Action Plan, which was launched in July, our Innovate RAP. And previously, there's been a strong commitment to reconciliation in Bayside, which I'm really proud to join their team recently and sort of continue that work. However, yes, you're right, it is a smaller Aboriginal population within the municipality. However, there's been many commitments made, including commitment to this role that I sit in from council, which is brilliant to be able to drive this work internally and in community. The RAP, obviously, moving on to our second Innovate RAP, which is a brilliant commitment, and a range of commitments around looking forward to, you know, developing things like a cultural learning strategy and underpinning sort of the internal and external engagement that we will work through in the coming year, particularly in this really exciting year for someone like me who's worked for a long time alongside friends and colleagues and community in this year of Voice, Treaty, Truth and referendum. It's a really exciting space, and I think the commitment to the Uluru Statement is that start of that journey for Council, and it coincides with many of the actions in our Reconciliation Action Plan. Our commitment aligns, as Julie, you've stated, with other plans and etc. across Council. And, you know, I think it's an exciting year for all of us, and it's a really unique opportunity, obviously, as you'd understand, to follow this journey and bring Council along and our community and our constituents and on this journey. And it's all about the journey, I think, and the learnings that you take from that.
Yeah, well, we're going to get a little bit into the actions. Thank you, Leanne, for that response. And we will come back to each of our panel speakers and from the local government sector. So, but I'd like to come across to Emily now, because we are starting to kind of question, sitting down with traditional owners at the moment, and they're sort of saying, oh, well, we're not really seeing much going on with the Yes campaign yet. What's going on? Are we going there? So I guess it's really timely for us to have this conversation with you. Emily Holm is the national field organiser with the From the Heart campaign. I wonder, Emily, if you can just put some context behind what is the campaign group, what is From the Heart about, its core purpose, and I guess, where are we going into this week of action ahead, if we can condense some of that.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate the little, what are you guys doing? That's how all my conversations start at the moment. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I will, of course, start by acknowledging that I'm on Aboriginal land, although I'm up here in New South Wales, so I'm on Awabakal country here in Newcastle. Don't hold it against me, please. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, emerging, and everybody on this call. I'd also like to acknowledge what I know you're all thinking, which is, why does a non-Indigenous person have a national leadership role on the campaign? And that is because we've got to do some work too. So this is about working together and walking together, and I'm very honoured to have this responsibility, and it is a big responsibility. So I'll acknowledge that as well. So who are we and what is our purpose? That's the easy question, and then we'll move into week of action and what's coming for the rest of the campaign. And you can cut me off if I get too into that and too excited, because I'm sure we'll have more time for that. From the Heart is one of many campaign groups and groups who are supportive of the Uluru Statement all around the country. The core purpose is to advance the call for Voice, Treaty, Truth in the Uluru Statement. Of course, the first step of that for us being voice. And so From the Heart, along with many other groups that I'm sure you're all very familiar with, have been working for years now as a kind of small team with a big board towards bringing about the referendum and working with both parties and working with communities, going around doing talks and webinars and things to kind of build support for the first step, being a step that needs to be initiated by government but taken by everybody. So that's who we are. I've been brought on at the end of last year to coordinate, the field element of the referendum campaign, so the getting everybody excited element. We're a relatively small team still, but that will change very quickly. And we've recently we're in the process of transitioning to a campaign footing, so setting up a big umbrella group called Australians for Indigenous Constitutional Recognition. I imagine that many of you will recognise the process from marriage equality of setting up a big org that all the supportive groups can come under one banner. So that's in process now. But I think From the Heart will still exist in some capacity, but we will be, focusing our efforts on a Yes campaign. And then in terms of what that looks like, there's a lot of ways I can talk about it, but I'll stick with what's coming first, which is that we're set to launch a Yes campaign on Thursday of next week in Adelaide, because I'm told that things happen outside of Sydney and Melbourne. I don't believe it yet, but I'm told that. So we're going to Adelaide, and we're going to have a big event with all of our kind of friends and campaigners who can come down to do some more planning of how they'll take their piece of the campaign, because we'll be running a massive decentralised campaign. So my job is to bring all the resources, research, planning together, and then give groups whatever they need to go out and do their piece of that, and to work with them to identify what that piece is. Councils have a huge piece of that work, so I'm very excited to tell you what I think that is and to hear from you what you think that is. But we'll be then having a big launch. There'll be a new Yes website where people can, and kind of bringing us to the week of action that will surround that launch. We're really asking that people focus on talking to friends and family about this, because many of you who've joined this webinar today probably have the same sense of anxiety that a lot of people who've already committed themselves to the voice and to the Uluru Statement have about what's being said, and about lots of detailed conversations. And there is room for that anxiety, but I would say too, we have a really strong footing to start with, really strong polling, really good support. And what we're finding is, for people who connect with that sense of, I need to know more, it's actually not coming from and that's why I don't want to vote for the voice. It's coming from I don't know what this is, and everyone's talking about it like I do, which creates a really great opportunity for local councils and for all people who want to support this to just open up a conversation in those terms, in an engagement term, rather than kind of having this back and forth. And local communities are really integral to making that happen in a real way, and making it feel quite open and safe to talk about. And then so week of action, lots of conversations, new website to sign up as volunteers. We're going to need, I won't tell you the number, but hundreds of thousands, ideally, of people who are at least committed to doing something on this, whether it's talking to their grandparents who came here from another country, or whether it's, knocking on 3,000 doors when we get to the last few weeks. All contributions start with signing up there. So those will be our kind of individual focuses. And the other things that'll be happening will be lots of events around the country put on by churches, councils, workplaces, whether they're private events in the meeting room to have a little morning tea, or whether they're big public events to invite community to come together and hear more about this. Those will be really important to kind of do a bit of show, not tell. I had a group from Euroa who couldn't wait, who went and did theirs on the 4th of Feb, and I was a bit worried. They didn't have council support. They didn't have the infrastructure behind them. They got 350 people. It proves that people want to hear about this. They want to know what they can do to help, and they also just want to engage in this conversation. So that's our week of action. And then from then, we'll have plenty more to ask you all to do.
That's brilliant, and that's a really good starting point for us, Emily, because many of us, and especially in the reconciliation camps, whether it's the Australian Reconciliation Network, all of us, peak state reconciliation groups, and all the local ones that we work with on the ground, we're all chomping at the bit. We've been ready for a really long time to get on this journey, and we've just been waiting for where's the go button, where's the sign to say we can get up and go. So if this is what this week of action looks like, and I guess we've already seen with the federal government at the Commonwealth level, we've seen at the state level, all the peak premiers have come together with joint statements, and obviously with the third level of government, that being local government, we know that I guess this is a pretty kind of natural flow on. But we are seeing, you know, a lot of these joint statements being produced by a lot of even with RAP organisations that are collectively coming together, like you said, Emily, about whether it's the larger corporates, the larger church groups, the larger community orgs, they're all banding together with those joint statements. And we're certainly working with multicultural communities who are right in there doing exactly the same thing at the moment. I'm going to throw back to Zali here, because as I said, we've been watching the media closely, even at the local ground level of local newsletters that go out. Your council's been very brave in its strides and its steps to say, we're ready, we're going to continue to support. What is that support going to look like for your council this year, beyond just putting something in the newsletter? Can you share a bit more about your actions this year, Zali?
Yeah, of course. And Emily, it's great to hear what's coming and to be able to plan for that, because that is really where we've been probably over the last 6 weeks, is really planning and mapping what it will look like. And one of the recommendation to adopt the statement in full that was tabled for council actually included a recommendation to take some practical action alongside of that. There was the symbolic, obviously, actions in terms of putting out the commitment on our social media and website and everything. But the final point of that was actually highlighting working in partnership with our First Nations Advisory Committee and community to develop our community engagement plan and comms plan. So we're at the moment tabling that with our committee to ensure that, again, that self-determination, that advisory around what we perceive as our opportunities, but that's really informed by our local First Nations community as well. So that's something that we've got moving at the moment. But through there, we've obviously recognised some low-hanging fruit in terms of inclusion in our local Banyule banner, which is our monthly newsletter that goes out to all residents, that being a really strong opportunity to inform and educate. And as we move towards having some greater engagement points in terms of information sessions and community engagement kind of platforms, that can be, again, a way to promote those opportunities for community as well. But we've recognised that I think it's 11 that come out this year that we're going to have an element included within there around engaging and informing around the Uluru Statement in full as well. So informing around treaty, voice and truth within that. But I guess outside of that, we've also recognised that we need to co-collaborate with other orgs that have committed to this work as well. We think that we need to look at Banyule as a whole, and we obviously can't reach everyone. We'd love to, but really trying to work in partnership with our local community groups, reconciliation groups, but also community organisations, and how we can best tackle this community, because we're in the strong belief that if we have an informed community, we have a community that will make the right choice on behalf of themselves. So touching on what Em said there, we want to give our residents and everyone that works, plays, everything within Banyule has the opportunity to have an informed decision moving forward towards the referendum. But we're also looking at how we can do that creatively. We recognise that there are community members that may be fearful in tabling questions and discussions. So we're also investigating how we can do that from a really creative sense as well, to ensure that we give them the opportunity to table any questions or concerns that they have. We obviously are going to be doing a whole reboot in our website to ensure that our community members have somewhere to go with reliable and credible information. We know that obviously misinformation is going to be huge over the next period of time. So we want to make sure that we can provide our community with somewhere to go to look for credible information, because we think then we have recognised that that's really important as well. Another way we're kind of looking into tapping into is actually engaging with diverse community groups locally. We obviously have a very diverse population, so we're wanting to tap into local community groups where we know large populations engage with. So people are familiar with the faces that this commentary and information is coming from as well, because we know that people feel safer in different environments. We're tapping into communicating with the mosque or the local churches to ensure that that community is also empowered within that as well. And we know our multicultural community are imperative in this period of time that we have. So something else we've also recognised is we're going to where the people are. So looking into what events we're hosting, we have large council events, and I know every council has their calendar of events already set. So we're wanting to just add value to those events and add value in terms of providing the opportunity for the thousands of people that filter through those events, that there is a space to go to talk about this topic, and really trying to influence, I guess, the highlighting of this discussion through those events as well, in terms of when we're facilitating acknowledgements or welcome to countries that we know are conducted at every large council event as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Zali. That's given us heaps, and we know that through Banyule, I mean, you've got really close and great Aboriginal leaders that you work with, and just a nod to Uncle Charles Parkiner, who is joining us today and does a lot to do with the Barban and Beak Aboriginal Gathering Place Committee, which sits in Banyule. And there's obviously other prominent, if we go down to Julie now, and I know obviously you've got gathering places and really strong traditional owner co-ops and so forth as well in Greater Geelong on Wadawurrung country. Julie, can we sort of talk about what it might look like for the leaders and the community members that you're going to be working alongside down there in terms of building that capacity to really understand that, I guess, this journey towards a national voice, and this around a federal voice is a constitutionally recognised voice, how community might also work with council staff and also community more broadly to say, well, you know, whatever is happening at the national conversation, we're already doing it at a state level. We already have treaty process and an advancement underway, and we already have truth telling underway as well. So, you know, we're already on this path in Victoria. Can you talk a little bit about what in Greater Geelong, how community will talk to this in your actions? You're on mute, Julie.
I think the IT gods hate me today, everybody. I don't know what's going on. I can't even explain it, and I'm not even going to try.
That's all good.
I hope you can see me enough and hear me well enough. Okay, thank you, Nicole. The question of the Uluru Statement of the Heart and where it fits into Geelong, the First Nation mobs, traditional owners and country, and how then it fits into the future lives of the Greater Geelong communities is, you know, varied questions. This is not just one audience. It's not one series or stream of comms and media. It's not, I'm going to try and look up so I can see you instead of just focusing on my Surface Pro. So how do you do that, Nicole and everybody here? How do you leverage something as important as this conversation in an impartial way that is equity-based? So we've had to really look really broad to do that. For example, so the strategic direction is provided by the Killinjit Aboriginal Advisory Committee, which is actually a membership of key leaders, elders and First Nation community members in that shared decision-making environment with council. And obviously, like a lot of advisory committees, co-chaired. So first of all, the strategic direction, then from there goes to the briefing to council for council to work on a position. That's council. So that's a different set of comms, different engagement. In terms of the First Nation, how does it have leverage and leadership is that the First Nation Killinjit members provide all the leadership in terms of how we're going to move it forward. What considerations do we need to have when we talk about conversations? Do mobs still want to meet in big groups? We've found out, no, they certainly don't. Cultural safety, lateral violence, and the complexity of the conversations. And First Nation people constantly being used as a vocal board or a point of conversation without any real legit follow-up means that we've got to do serious work. So the serious work is led by Killinjit. I'm their little, you know, person on the ground, and I'm happy with that as a Torres Strait Islander. I'm happy to have my place. I don't have to be the big voice in the room. I'm happy to provide the room for the voices to come together. So our partners and big friends are the G21 First Nation Pillar, which brings together all the First Nation mobs from education to business. A huge eco-economic development initiative here with state government. So today they've come on formally as our member for our Uluru Statement of the Heart events this year. Geelong Aboriginal Employment Task Force, again, full of another series of great First Nation stakeholders. So really it's just sharing and making sure the information is shared so then they can go do their great deadly work. We see a key focus of elders, where elders meet wisdom and knowledge and moving forward, is through our LACG. Auntie May Owens, go on, been around for like forever. But the voice of our elders here in Geelong, a community full of voices. Elders are very important here. We all sort of stop short when an elder says, you calm down, you lot. So they're very important to leading engagement, to ensuring living cultural practices of the Kulin nations are, welcomed and embraced, to ensure that all groups, men, women, stolen gen. We've got big stolen gen community here. Our community is built on stolen gen, over 20 children's homes. So another leading voice, again, led by elders who come here to Geelong to find their mobs. Our cooperative opened in the 1970s, then went on to support the Ballarat mob. Mob, same families, everyone looking for mobs. Traditional owner RAPs have only been here in a formal capacity since 2006. So you've got lots of living history, lots of narrative, lots of cultural business going on here, and everybody is important, from the young one, the new baby, to the elder. So it's pushed out through our leaders, it's led by our leaders, it's given back to community in every single opportunity. The role that we see ourselves is facilitating community events in terms of venues, access, equity, availability, removing exclusivity inside the systems inside local government. For example, our community groups in Geelong are provided with free access to utilise and hire our venues. We've started a health program with Barwon Health Aboriginal team, Watherong Cooperative Health Services, to ensure that we have families getting free access to memberships to our 4 leisure time centres. These were points where the people were literally excluded. So they're points we need to have more of a reparation, a serious conversation. So when you talk about the Uluru Statement of the Heart, we've got to provide the comfort, the safety, and then the access points. So our men's and women's groups just want venues. They'll yarn up themselves. Fine, done. Stolen gen, they just maybe want buses and different things to get their families around, done. Mobs want to be healthy. They want to be healthy. They want to have the best out of life, live their best lives. If it means a free pass to the leisure time centre, done. All of this goes to the deep work of the heart. There's no light end of the pool here, you mob. Once we're in, we're in.
Yeah.
And some of the biggest work we're going to be challenged with is the continual debate around equity. So the conversations for our mobs is we're doing it this way. Strategic internal direction, reforms inside. So our business, first mob business, everyday business, there's no separate. Externally, how do we move the heart out? Our heart is being placed inside our wrap. And the program sits under the CEO. We have key directors involved in oversight. So it's constantly, we're yarning up every day now. So it's getting a bit uncomfortable, but it's all done with love. To bring community on board, we launch our first heart event in National Reconciliation Week, which is about the story of us. Who are we? How we get here? Who are our mobs? On NAIDOC Week, because it's you're the elders, we're running an elders circle, elders talking country, straight up and down elders business. And then on the 4th of August, we have a National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Day for the education workforce. To bring together to have our LACG, Justice, and our elders run this. They're 3 formal events. We're planning to do a councillor briefing later in the week in Zali. So I need to talk to you, girl, about how you actually got it to council. Deadly. That's the biggest, hardest thing. So everything we do now is community focused, community centric. Even the way in which we do business at the city is moving to future ways, which places customer community at the heart of everything we do. So our heart can now sit within the city's heart and give it twice the strength and twice the courage to move forward. So that's us in a nutshell.
And really, you are, you know, absolutely walking the talk. I mean, I guess there will be a lot of people tuned in today, Julie, who will say this is the absolute model of where we are going when voice is at the table and guiding the conversation and leading the conversation, and that shared decision making is happening. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It also shines a light on the absolute importance. I liked what you were saying about, you know, truth telling, shining a light on the truth telling, but as that is the precursor to the reconciliation. And that, you know, I like that you've said, you know, it is done with love. And it's such a beautiful point that you've made. And I'd like to, if we could, I know we're getting a lot of conversation and a little bit of chat happening in the chat space as well. I imagine that there will be people wanting to reach out to you beyond today's webinar to say, this is great, the way that you're doing this and the way you're shaping this, you're navigating complete new pathways. And I don't want to use that word pathways, you're navigating and putting footprints in the sand almost for the first time in local government, Julie. And I think that, and even Zali, in the work that, and Leanne, that I'd imagine people might want to reach out beyond today. So we will let people know where to reach you. Most of them will, but I suspect you'll have a lot of questions, and just opening the floor as well to people who are tuned in with us. If you do want to ask some questions along the way, please ask them. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we'll certainly forward them on to Julie, Zali or Leanne or Emily if we at the end, so you can respond directly to the questions. I do want to come across to Emily now just for a moment, and I'll come back to you, Leanne. But Emily, in regards to the way that you sort of talked about a little bit of that interaction that the From the Heart campaign group's been having with local governments across the state. And I know that you do have a resource kit, a local government resource kit, which has been pulled together, which have some really clear directions and calls to actions about the steps that local governments can take. Just for those who may not be, you know, already knee deep and doing all those strides in the sand as Greater Geelong is doing, can you sort of perhaps, you know, peel it back to some of those call to actions that you have in the toolkit, that resource toolkit? We're going to share it now for people to access, but if you can talk to some of those for people who are just, you know, getting into this journey a little bit, that would be great.
Yes, absolutely. I think what I would say about that too is there's kind of two speeds at which councils are operating, both of which as valid as one another. And so the kind of the elements that lean towards, and I'm just checking this document. I'm not sure we can take credit for it. I think it might belong to someone else, unless it's the one. Yes, it does. But that is okay because we are sending it around as well. The councils who are in a position where there hasn't been a formal motion passed or there isn't that work being done, I sympathise with what Julie was just saying about kind of getting to that point. To kind of then be in a position to say, what will we do to make this happen? And I'd encourage you all know your workplaces best, and I'd encourage you to do whatever needs to be done and to ask for whatever support you need from us to make that happen. For those who are already supportive, there's a big lot of thinking going into at the moment, and we have a pretty clear view, but also I'm getting new and great ideas every day from supportive councils about how this could look. And I'll spend a little bit of time on that, and then we can maybe come back to the everything else, because I think most of you here today, it might be safe to say, are supportive, at least in some way, and interested in hearing what that would look like when we got to the point of being able to implement it. So I touched on before the fact that people want to know about this. People in your local community, even though they might say, well, what are the details? I'm not sure. The underlying emotion is not, for the most part, is not one of I'm going to vote no. It's one of I'm not sure what this is and I'm not really allowed to talk about it because it's a bit awkward. And we know that the way to overcome that is to come together in local trusted spaces and be able to ask the question, or, you know, have somebody answer it for you, essentially, before you have to raise it. And we've got a number of strategies in place to address that at a kind of hyperlocal campaign group individual level. And then we're very directly asking councils to replicate that as much as possible, because nobody knows their community the way councils do. And I have found in my engagement with councils, they tend to very closely reflect the community that they look after, as opposed to state governments. And so I think that is, while it can be tricky to navigate for you guys, very, very important and very useful to the campaign, because we'll get a real sense when talking to the council of where their community's at. So very practical things. I think, you know, next week, holding a barbecue for people to come together and hear about and talk about the Voice to Parliament, I think is going to be a really good way to show your council that, oh, people really want to hear from us. They want to know about this. They want to get involved. And we've got a whole Dropbox full of resources that you can print off, and I'm happy to send emails and send volunteers down to help out. That's the now thing. Looking forward into planning a 6 or 8 month campaign, which I hope you'd all be doing if you're over the hurdle of internal bureaucracies. We have available a really cool toolkit, which is kind of like an out-of-the-box town hall event. And so we supply the kind of framework. We can supply the speakers, or we can bring your speakers in and kind of mesh it together. It can be in person, it can be hybrid, it can be online. And this is a really good engagement tool, because you can just say, here's the event, it's a town hall on The Voice, everyone should come, here's what will be addressed. And so folks who are a little unsure will turn up. Particularly because we know demographically the people we need to reach are high information voters. So they want to know about this, even if they sound skeptical. And it gives you and the council a really good insight, because it has like a two-way data element to it. So the really cool thing will be that you'll be able to turn around to your bosses and say, we had this many people show up and their support went from X to Y in the dashboard behind the scenes. So I've found that very useful for corporates and councils, because you've got RAPs that you're doing this under, and you've got motions that have been passed, but you want to be able to show some movement and whether it was effective and what the number one question is, so that you can then take the next step with your communities. So we have that available. There's some information I can send around after about how to get in touch with those people. And, you know, some people are doing a small one to start, and then they'll think about where to roll it out. We're also in the process of organising, and I know a lot of the reconciliation groups and other people in the communities are up for this. We're in the process of putting together a local presenters group. So this will be a group in your area that you can kind of tap to go to the local nursing home who might want to talk. And it's not a yes talk, it's an engagement talk. So it's, here's what it is, here's the referendum, here's some common questions. We know, and it's good for us that it is the case that the more people understand what's being put to them, the more likely they are to support it and to advocate to others to support it. So I really see the role of council as opening up those spaces for communication and inviting the local groups and the local kind of institutions as well as individuals to participate in those town hall events and create more for your community, because you'll know all the groups around the place who might need that.
That's a massive task in itself, Emily, to have, you know, local speakers. And I know many of them are obviously First Peoples, elders and uncles, and, you know, tying in with the theme for National Reconciliation Week, be the voice for generations. Many of these local presenters who you've brought together have been those voices for generations. That's obviously going to have been or has been a huge task for the From the Heart campaign group to bring those speakers together. And if you're, you know, doing that in every state, I imagine that's been quite a feat. And when people say, oh, what's the Yes campaign been doing? This is obviously clear evidence what they've been doing. So we really look forward to hearing more about who those local presenters might be, because I imagine there are local governments across the state who are saying, we would love to have one of those speakers. So I'd imagine the request list is going to be rather large. But thank you for touching on those points. So barbecues, we know the town hall events, a whole heap of kitchen table conversations are going to go on with big groups like, you know, the Women's Trust or Victorian Women's Trust are all putting their campaigns out too that people can link into. Another thing you talked about was all the merchandise, you know, that we're like, we can't wait to get our hands on the Yes merchandise with pink, purple and red t-shirts and whatever they're going to be. We can't wait. Can you talk about the process of getting merchandise if councils want that? Because that's obviously, everybody wants a t-shirt, whilst I'm just showing mine off here.
Well, I can, yeah. So, and I should say as well, as you mentioned, kitchen table conversations, all this other stuff that's going to go on at a more arm's length from the council, but they will be doing tours around the country to bring people together to hear about that process. And so whatever you can do to facilitate that, you know, free spaces, just to say the quiet part out loud. With regard to merchandise, because we're running this as such a kind of decentralised campaign, and we're partnering with different organisations and campaign groups to bring these pieces together, those materials will all be made available for printing and for doing whatever you want with, you know, with an asterisk, please don't do anything crazy with them. But if councils want them to print, there's a booklet about, you know, how to talk about this. So it would be fantastic for me to be able to say to people in Bayside, for example, if you pop into the council, there's a big stack of them there, you can just grab 10. And the same goes for t-shirts, stickers and badges. I'll be making that ask of lots of other groups as well, but that's a big piece of work for down the track. And for those who are dead keen, yeah, we can send you the Dropbox. It's embargoed until Saturday for public thing, but if you want to get some t-shirts printed and get some stickers made up, go crazy.
Excellent. And I'm going to loop back to Leanne now, because I want to sort of touch in about, you know, we sort of haven't talked about what avenues that your council, and again, we sort of talked about you not having a huge demographic of Aboriginal community in there, but you certainly have a lot of, you know, Aboriginal suppliers that work with your councils, you know, a lot of groups that are very, very actively engaging with your constituents. Can you talk about what avenues before today's conversation that you would have been looking and lining up to put in place to inform your constituents about the voice process, whether it be, you know, around referendum, that process, so forth? I'll hand over to you, Leanne.
Thanks, Nicole. And can I just say too, I'm feverishly scribbling notes from my two amazing colleagues, Zali and Julie, who have some raft of amazing ideas. And I just before I start, just want to say one thing you said, Julie, at the end of yours, when you talked about ask community what council can do to me. That's at the heart for me of the voice and all of that, about asking what we can do and having people at the table for these discussions. And for instance, we've got a very active Aboriginal RAP Advisory Committee who we have just put an EO out to the community to increase membership, but also really trying to drive Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander membership on that, to have a voice for council. So I think that's really paramount to all of this in any sort of self-determination work, obviously. But yeah, it's a really, I don't know, it sits at the heart, I think, of what we're looking at doing here at Bayside. And in terms of, more broadly, for instance, I look at it, I mean, the way I've approached this over many years is looking at all the arms or the sphere of influence of council. It's pretty huge local government. I call it like there's lots of organisations within organisations. And, you know, just some examples of in my time here and prior to my time, this was happening before I came here, things like working with our procurement team, who have a brilliant social enterprise panel and have a range of businesses that are available to councils to procure business, all from small to large. We have 5, I think, currently Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander businesses on that list. So there's so many avenues. Whilst we have a smaller population, I think in terms of literally residing in Bayside, as we all know, people don't just stick to the little local government council areas. People use services across council. We have the Aboriginal Gathering Place, Derrim at Willem in Mordialloc in Kingston, that I work quite closely with, Casey and Frankston. So making those connections, looking at procurement of business, looking at our internal engagement, I think, is huge. And we're still in the process of sort of working through with our RAP Advisory Committee and our internal external stakeholders on exactly how this will work. But similar to the other councils, looking at developing a 12-month sort of comms plan around this and how we look at moving through that over the next 12 months. But key to that will be our Reconciliation Advisory Committee, who will have a strong voice in that and play a key role in sort of advising, obviously, council in the direction in this space and how we might engage community and how we might bring elders and community along council's journey while we go along their journey as well, I guess. For example, things like we're organising treaty speakers to come First Peoples Assembly. I attended a treaty forum at Dirrimut last week, and they will come and speak internally to staff, and quite possibly some ideas are to do that more broadly in the community. I think starting with internal engagement is a big part for us. We've got a lot of champions within the organisation that if we get the messaging right internally, we can influence business, we can influence contracts, we can influence a community engagement team, for instance, looking at any surveys that we put out externally to maybe include a question around this and start getting community. And I was talking to our community engagement manager earlier today about that very, putting it out there, and I'm a big believer in putting that information out and speaking to it, and sort of the more you hear it, the more questions you ask. It's like Emily was saying, I don't think questions are a bad thing. I have family members who say, I'm confused. What are we voting for? What is it? And I think if you peel it back and start putting some information out, and council's in a prime position for that, I think people can make an informed decision, which is what this is all about. And also looking at working with, the sphere of influence sort of idea around, yes, we have council facilities and own things that we can look at that, but we can also look at the sporting clubs and libraries and etc. that have their own and doing wonderful things in this space, and can go alongside our reconciliation action plans, but have that voice, that Uluru Statement of the Heart at the core of it all, to sort of, increase our reach and messaging both internally and then externally across council and across Bayside and probably beyond when we look at linking in with other partners, etc.
That's great. Thank you. And you've touched on some really critical points there, Leanne. And I love what you said about the community surveys. Both Zali and Emily have touched on this as well. And I think just in terms of being able to gauge, do the pulse check of where your respective communities are at with, do they feel informed? Are they, doing those sort of type of questions, are they supporting? Because the greatest thing that we've already picked up is people are ready, willing, and have been waiting for a long time to support, and are actually waiting for the banners to go up. And again, saying, where do I join? But if council's not putting that messaging out or inviting that message or making its position really clear, people have got nowhere to go with their support. And so I think what you've touched on about doing any community survey that's going out at the moment, or newsletter that can actually ask those questions to get that information back, and again then share it back out about what that level of support actually looks like. Because as the data is showing us, there is a large amount of support. And I think that unless we're able to share that more broadly, people aren't finding their platforms to go to. But I also wanted to touch on another thing you talked about, was local government areas, don't always recognise or appreciating of the traditional owner boundaries. And I think there's that absolute opportunity, probably broadly across the country as well here, for local governments to partner up on their forums, and not necessarily and to sort of break the chains off a little bit of being confined to their local government areas. Emily, is this what you are seeing, some of local governments saying we are going to come together because we've got 2 or 3 traditional owners across our LGA area? We'll join forces and resources?
There are certainly some areas that are looking at doing that, or sharing the resources amongst them, just as there are councils who are struggling to get moving as quickly because they have some multiple stakeholder groups with different opinions. And so, I should probably acknowledge to the group that I do know that there are councils that have that difficulty because they're ready to go, and then they're kind of negotiating between other councils and other groups. And I think that's really important to get right.
It might actually be a question we can put to Julie, because Julie's obviously, working across, and we've talked about those linkages to Ballarat and other of the coastal councils. Julie, if you're still with us, are you seeing the possibility of being able to do that, where you'll come together with the other surrounding local councils to partner up on some of your events? I'm not sure if we've still got Julie. I hope we have. I can't see her in the background, but if Julie, if you're with us, pop back in. And Zali, being in metro space as well, are you seeing this could be a possibility for Banyule and Darebin potentially, because you do a lot of joint events with them and have done so?
Yeah, we definitely are taking the perspective of it from a traditional owner perspective. We're not bound by our kind of boundaries in local government. We're guided by our traditional owner boundaries in a lot of ways, and that is a new approach for local government to get their head around, to know that there isn't that border that we have to abide by in this space. A lot of our local Aboriginal corps like VACA and, VACHO and all of that we are really drivers for a lot of significant topics in this space. Again, bounded by council boundaries as well. The community is spread across the whole northern region, and I look at it from a northern region perspective, but I was in the south. So, at Kingston, we were guided by Southeast, so we'd go all the way down to the Mornington Peninsula to cross-collaborate and work. So particularly with the gathering place being really central for us in a lot of this work and a lot of these discussions that will be had, we, as the gathering place, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them, and Uncle, sorry if you think I am, who's sitting in here at the screen today, but that's not bounded by Banyule's borders either. Any mob that wants to come through there to be supported from there, they will be. So I definitely think that we will be taking kind of the mask off our boundary and really understanding that if we want this to be benefiting our community and forming our community, that there will need to be some shifts in that kind of boundary understanding moving forward. So, but if I think you keep that kind of core purpose of this work, which is informing the most community, I don't think that really there's any issue in doing that collaboration work across different council boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've seen that collaboration between Nillumbik and Darebin and Banyule over the years. So I think it's probably, fair to say that may just happen very naturally, but I'm conscious of everybody's time. We may break out a little bit early as well, but I want to sort of just filter back and just make sure that today we've shared the resources for the Victorian Aboriginal and local government strategy. We do want to put that in front of everybody, just because again, that strategy talks a lot to ensuring that First Peoples voices and traditional owner voices are at the local government table. So we've flagged that in today's discussion. We've also shared the resource, that local government toolkit, which you rightly pointed out has come from the Uluru Statement.org group, Emily. But really exciting to be part of and see this week of action ahead of us. And I think many of us are quite excited about what this looks like, and that it could potentially feel like a big wave of support is about to wake up and be very present. Is that what you're getting, feeding into the national, at your campaign platform at the moment? Is that the response you're getting?
Yeah, people are jumping out of their skin to be told where they can go and what they can do and what they should say. And so that's really encouraging, because this is going to take everybody talking to everybody and everybody being kind of not on script, but being prepared to engage and prepared to have some uncomfortable discussions, or to kind of, a lot of my friends and family are very keen not to speak for anybody. And at this point, we are going to have to wave the flag and say, everybody who supports this, you need to talk to everybody you know. Don't be afraid. Don't make mistakes. Like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to say, oh, I didn't hear about that. We really need to unleash that. And we'll launch our website this week, the Yes website. So that'll be the kind of funnel point for all those people who are like, oh, I didn't know there was a week of action. How do I get involved? And it's really only the beginning too. So we'll see plenty more weeks after that of come and have training to talk about how to talk about the voice with friends and family. You mentioned the kitchen table conversations. It's a big part of our strategy, that methodology that is very deeply and ingrained in community and very civic engagement minded, which is very parallel to what councils do and what you're about. We're hoping to get an extraordinary amount of kitchen table conversation hosts. So this would be, a person who is interested, is on board and wants to help, and then can gather together 8 to 10 friends and have what I've been told not to call a voice Tupperware party, but essentially a much more serious and enlightening experience, where then 10 people leave their house fired up and ready to talk about this and feeling like they really have some ownership over the conversation. So yeah, those things will start from this week being talked about more. You'll see them in the media more, the opportunity to sign up to the kitchen tables, the opportunity to get involved in our campaign, which will then become training each other, building local groups. Terrifying stuff. It's a big job, but very exciting.
And, you know, and the From the Heart campaign group has just an abundance of resources and information on it. And this call saying there's not enough information, we're all starting to realise that's nonsense, and that there is actually an abundance of it. For local councils who are sort of getting to that point, who are thinking, great, well, we really need to get our platforms ready and equipped with putting those links up for our constituents to access that information. Is that a sort of something that From the Heart is encouraging, just making sure that their websites are all equipped with the information so that there is no shortage, that, you know, people can cross-pollinate that information really quickly?
Absolutely. And I've had lots of lovely, well-meaning old men emailing me saying, I thought there was no information, but now I'm drowning in it. I don't want to read all this. And so I think to the extent that councils are able to put some information there and say, this is what it is, this is what it's about, you can come to the following places to hear talks or whatever it is that you're able to facilitate. I'd also encourage those of you who have lots of resources and who have done kind of a plan already, if you can distill that down to a scaffold and share that with your friends at other councils, I think that there's no harm in doing that, because the more people that do it, the better off we'll all be. I'm seeing some questions here about the week of action. Yes, the answer is it's kicking off on the 18th. It's a week that's longer than a week, because everybody's gone, oh, I want to put an event as well. Can I put it on the 27th? So, you know, it's a week in the sense that it might go for 4 weeks.
Yeah. And also, you know, for those councils that are really ready and are putting position statements up, we're getting a number of queries from people who are, you know, saying to us, organisations, is it okay if we use RecVic's position statement as a bit of a foundation document for us? You know, is that something, you know, in terms of position statement templates, is that something that From the Heart has up online for people to kind of start structuring something as a public statement for themselves? Or...
I think we do on our current website. We're going to have a new one, so I'll take that as a content note, because we definitely are going to have an extraordinary amount of resources that we're going to have to put in there, and we're working through the process of what's out and what needs to be put in terms of languages and other things going forward.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that councils may preempt, and we're certainly getting the people knocking on our door straight away saying, we'd really like to support the voice, how can we volunteer? And I guess from council's perspective, and Zali, Julie or Leanne could possibly talk about this, you know, I know councils work a great deal with schools. You know, we have 2,500 schools across Victoria, and those young voices are what influence our older voices. If we see where the largest, you know, RAP growth is across the state and the country, it is within the early years in the schools, school settings. Can Zali, perhaps in the Banyule area, will you be kind of working and engaging with schools as well with your commitments?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to showcase, I guess, going off I think it's the 6th or the 7th generation principle that the Aboriginal community has, is that decisions that are made now need to be made on the thought of what the 7th generation impact is from this point. So that notion that we're really highlighting is going into schools and saying that this is going to impact them, and they have a right to have a voice in this discussion, and potentially an opportunity to speak to other population groups around this, because this is going to be impacting them. And I think that, you know, I'm not speaking out in terms, and I think that the generations to come are very more progressive in their thinking and are more open and willing and forever learners, I could imagine. So I think we're really wanting to ensure that they're empowered through this discussion as well. And I think when you hearing and for a young person saying, well, this impacts me, so I wanted to have a conversation with you about it. And we know schools do this work really great. There's reconciliation groups within schools now. You know, I didn't finish school that long ago, but there wasn't that opportunity. So it's such a breath of fresh air to see that opportunity for the schools. So I think really empowering and embracing the schools and those young voices off the 7th generation principle that Aboriginal people have is going to be really, really impactful through these discussions as well.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Zali. And Leanne, did you want to add there? Yep.
Yeah, no, just reiterating what Zali said, I just in this role and in my previous role, I am very passionate about schools and education, and because like Zali said, I think there is definitely, I've got teenage kids, there's a generational change around thinking. Sometimes they say to me, Mum, why don't we just do these things? Why don't we just change it? But they don't really, yeah, it's a different headspace coming to these issues. So I think it's a really unique opportunity. We will be working with schools, early childhood. I work with the family services team. We'll be working through that pathway, because the other thing I find is I've had you know, in my previous role at Daniel, we did a lot of education with senior executives, and I'd had comments directly to me when we've brought in people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, to do education sessions, that, oh, my kids were talking about that at school. Oh, that's what they meant. Oh, and then these conversations, kitchen table, like you said, Emily, happen. And I find that because kids present things in a very matter-of-fact way, they're just like, well, this is what it is. And that education is not just for the kids, it's for the families, and then the communities, and then the centres, etc. So I think it's a no-brainer that it's a great place. And there's a lot of resources, reconciliation. So I always share the resources you have online with schools. There's that much. I think it's good for adults, actually, those resources, some of them. So there's a lot of things around. Teachers are very engaged. They just need the support because they don't have the time to deliver on. And I think it's a great space for councils to have an influence over and share resources and share knowledge and assist there.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Leanne. And I can see Julie. We can see you. Hello, you're back.
Hi. Zoom kicked me out and I had to let me back in. But look, I'm here. Actually, I'm here.
Oh, you are. You're back. And really, I guess we're sort of starting to get into the last kind of 15 minutes of our conversation. And I know that we've had a number of questions and a couple of people sort of having to leave. And many people have said, are we recording today? We are. But Julie, I want to come across either, you know, in terms of, we touched on a conversation about before, just about local councils that have got shared traditional owner groups in their areas, about the possibility of those local governments then, you know, coming together to, you know, jointly present events and do forums together, just whether that might be a likelihood for Geelong. And also we just touched on there about, you know, our engagement with schools, you know, those voices of the next generations and the importance of them actually having a say, you know, and supporting to inform some of their adults, their parents and so forth. I just wanted to see if you wanted to talk on either of those points.
Well, yeah, in Geelong, as you can imagine, there are several voices around cultural heritage and traditional custodianship and the authority that comes with that. So what we both have the traditional owners and the other First Nation key stakeholders on Killinju.
Yeah.
So they come together to make decisions there. So they work really well together and make really good, you know, collective decisions or provide guidance or advice. Also, because it's not our place to be involved in social political conversations, that actually belongs to community. And through neo-colonial systems, you can see why mobs still pulling each other apart. So they need to break that down. That's a bigger conversation. So what we do is enter into yarn-ups and conversations where both groups are there. For example, we utilise other platforms, G21 doing updates on the agenda, our employment task force. You'll have all our groups together when it comes to kids stuff. So obviously the LACG is where the families and a lot of people come together for the greater good of the young ones and for future proofing. So we utilise that. But then what we do is build communications and relationship based for me, it's equity, equity, equity. So what we do with the Wathaurong Aboriginal community or cooperative would be replicated, but focused on the needs and the wants of the traditional owners, and then that moves again to elders and to young ones, to youth, to men, to women. We keep the same messaging, but the way in which the relationship rolls really is specific to the relationship. So no controls, no hidden agendas, and we only go where community wants us to go. So, for example, I think a lot of our work's going to be done in wording and language and our communications. And I'm really into and want to know more around from the HEART team around targeted comms, because the way in which I'd have a yarn up for mobs, not the way in which a group of stakeholders, let's say 26th of January is a great example where we had to run over 20 different workshops for different types of community groups to talk with First Nation people first. So, Nicole, I guess the biggest thing about getting to young ones is being where the young ones' voice is and ensuring that they're part of the conversation. So we have captured the voice of our young ones to the age of probably double digits. And then from that up, they're part of that intergenerational yarn up circle. So, you've got to have your youth workers, your engagement teams, your children's workers. Never assume to take anything on you can't take on, but utilise, your mob connections, your family ties. And we found when you're putting together engagement events, bureaucracy does not have to be in the room at all. You don't have to have process. Traditional opening, good mob, good feed, good place. We found that mob wants to come together and yarn up and know that their business is their business. They're really sophisticated, smart, been doing it for thousands of years. What we've got to do is stay in the background, and that's a real challenge because stakeholders, everybody's got, I guess, a stake, in it somewhere. It's really about ensuring that community voice is what is captured and what's put forward. We don't buy into the conversation. For example, the 26th of January was an adoption from the councillors with their community. So being able to see yourself as that functioning officer can be really challenging if you're going to go up against some stuff where you think, I could just get in there and yarn up, I could bloody help them out and help everybody. Sometimes we can't help. Sometimes we have to watch the mess. What we might see as mess, something unknown, something uncharted. Be very mindful we're on Kulin Nation country at all time. None of the land was ever ceded. So people, I have mixed opinions, but the other thing too that we considered is that what makes up your population. So we found out, a hard way, of course, is that you've got your traditional owners, your mob, their country, their nation, their story, their voice, the narrative, the heritage, first point of protection, conservation and restoration, and equity. Then you've got what people see themselves as pioneer families. They don't see themselves as land grabbers. They don't see themselves as doing anything but trying to have a better go at life. And they will come from trades, immigration, a lot of different policies. And so you've got to bring all those people together and then be prepared to just stay in the back of the room and allow community to do what community do best. And it's awkward and it's challenging, Nicole, every day, but
it is.
You just get up and have a crack.
That's it. And that's a beautiful kind of comment for us to kind of launch out of. We just got to have a crack, and that's exactly where we're going. And I guess if I want to just go around the table to our other panel members and just to make sure that when we sort of close the thread today, because we're about to sort of wrap up, I'd just like a sort of reflective comment on today. Julie's landed it perfectly. Have a crack and stand back and let the voices come forward. I think that's really good information for us, and I love that. Perhaps I can go around to Zali. I can see you on my screen, up to Emily, and then Leanne, and then we'll close up for today. But thanks, Julie.
No, and thanks, Nick, for tabling the discussion. I think the learning and the journey, which is what I keep kind of echoing, has been is really important. And these yarns that we're having today, and for those that are listening, these learnings are going to be a part of your journey and your learnings as well. But I guess to finish, we're at a really monumental time in history for our people and for our country as a whole, this unified approach. So really encourage you to take a deep dive and reflect into what is your role as a local government in this point in time, and really have a really great understanding about how you see your role and then what you will do within that role. So you can always reach out. You know, I'm not going to say it's best practice, because there's learnings that we've had ourselves internally to get to where we are as Banyule, but we're not asking you to recreate the wheel, and you've got some really great leaders in the space, including Reconciliation Victoria, to really guide you into understanding what's your opportunity moving forward.
Thanks, Zali. Brilliant. Leanne, over to you.
Thanks, Nicole. So many great learnings from this. I think the journey one, and it's one I talk about a lot at work, that it is a journey. This is a journey and it's a process. And like a lot of things, the journey is where the learning is. And I really like, Julie, your point around sometimes having uncomfortable conversations and putting things out and being prepared to look at that. I think that sometimes is a difficult position to sit in government to do, but I think it's important, and I think it allows community, or all community, you know, all aspects of our municipality to have a think through and learn from this, and talk with First Nations people and hear and just immerse themselves in this and learn. I think, you know, we don't have to have all the answers, but it's sort of putting forward the ideas and actually talking it through, and bringing our organisations along with us. Internal engagement is a lot. We have a lot of arms, you know, local government has a lot of arms out there, I don't know how to say it, in community, in terms of all the different services. And I think it is important that we bring people along for that, educate and raise awareness internally, so that we can have champions in our organisation on this to go out and do this and inform. And I think also, Julie, you touched on a really important one, which really sat with me, and Zali actually, traditional owner boundaries, and where, you know, ways things have been done over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I think that is mindful for us to remember. It's not just a local government area. I'm continuously working. I've always continued. I work with people don't look at their boundary and stop. I think we need to look beyond, and if there are gathering places and communities outside, which Bayside, that's a lot of us, it's brilliant, because the community still goes and accesses those places, right? From Bass Coast down, when I was at Frankston, from Bass Coast down to the city where Vars is. So I think just being mindful of traditional ways and respectful, and just, going into it with the right frame of mind. I think, you know, we're all going to get there. It's really quite exciting year ahead, I think.
I think so too. Beautifully put. Thank you. And, you know, journey is where the learning is, and that's absolutely correct. And I think if we can, I'm going to throw to Emily, unless, Julie, are you comfortable for us to close today? Yeah. So Emily, I'm going to give you the final bit of the floor. You know, it is the Uluru Statement from the Heart since 2017 has been an absolute invitation to the nation. And, you know, it is, I guess, for the third tier of local government, it is the opportunity to really embrace this, you know, this invitation. And I guess if we can have a parting word from the Heart campaign, you guys are going to be working on the ground, not just at the, you know, at the online section where we are. You'll be out on the ground ferociously for the next however long it is until the referendum is called. And I think, as Julie and I caught up, you know, a couple of weeks back, she said, I don't care if I don't sleep this year, as long as we, you know, we get to the destination we want to get to. Many of us feel this way. And I guess, Emily, if there's something that you want to part with for, you know, local governments to stay connected with you in the journey ahead, how we can support, what would you like to kind of reflect on and leave us with today? Oh, mute.
Well, I'll need to, sorry about that. I feel the weight of parting remarks, guys, but what I want to say is that I understand that this feels like a big undertaking with everything else that councils need to consider. And I would just ask you to reflect on the fact that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity that we're being given to take the first step. And if we hesitate, we won't get another invitation. There will not be a second step that we can take. And I know for many of us, we're thinking, voice, what about treaty? What about truth? If we don't take a big step forward as a nation, and if we don't bring our communities with us, there won't be a second step in my lifetime. And so I would encourage you all to think about the ways that you can, with your community, encourage a bigger first step forward so that there can be a second and a third on the theme of journey. And for Victorians in particular, the polling is so good there. You have your own voice process happening. You have all these fantastic councils that have turned up today to hear from Reconciliation Australia and these other wonderful women here. You can lead the nation on this, and I just encourage you to do so. And anything you do with your councils that is beautiful and amazing, and there's big learnings from that, send it through to us. We'll work with the other peak bodies to make that happen in Queensland and in WA, in places that need to see that it's a step that you can take, that's safe to take, that the council will get lots of love for taking. And that I would also just remind you all, this is about supporting your community on a journey they're already on. 60% of Australians support this, and that there's no yes campaign yet. There's a big no campaign, and without hearing anything, 60% of Australians' best instinct is to get on board with this. So we're really just asking you to help make that happen, and I'd really encourage you to lean in.
Thank you. Excellent. And that is going to bring us to a close today on that note. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us for our first Maggolee webinar for the year. I hope we were completely on point where we need to be in this conversation as the Yes campaign begins to launch and we're all ready to go and get going for it. I want to say a very special thank you to our panel members today, to Zali Mifsud. Thank you very much for being the First Nations lead, a strong leader for Banyule City Council. Leanne, Pearson for being a strong ally and reconciliation supporter for many years at Bayside City Council. Julie Saylor-Briggs, walking the talk, doing the awesome work as an executive leader in the senior policy area for City of Greater Geelong. Absolutely beautiful work. And Emily Holm, thank you for being the field organiser, the national field organiser. I don't envy your job. It's going to be hard yards for the year ahead. From the Heart campaign, from our heart to your heart, we'll be with you and walking alongside strongly with First Peoples, and appreciate everyone's time today. We've been getting some lovely feedback in the chat. For those questions we couldn't get to, please send them through to us and we will field them back out. By all means, keep checking in on Maggolee on our website. We will keep putting all the information up, and this webinar will be there for everybody to share with their colleagues and broader community stakeholders. Thanks, guys. Have a lovely afternoon and keep in touch. See you.